thanks everybody for coming. Welcome to the Center on Shattuck Street, a almost brand new senior and community center for Littleton. Really nice and perfect for presentations like this. We're here because we had so much interest in the topic of nuclear power and Professor Aghara speaking that we moved from the library, which we've had some GAC meetings there, and it's kind of a tight space. So that's why we moved here for a bigger space, because there was so much interest in this. And I really want to express my deep appreciation to Eco-Nuclear Solutions, including Carolyn McCreary, who's just done incredible organizing and educating for me around nuclear power. It's something I'm still looking to learn more about. For those that are newer to the Green Advisory Council, this is something I started about 10 years ago, really the opportunity to share ideas for each of the now 12 communities I represent about environmental initiatives, climate initiatives in your communities, and then obviously an update about what's going on at the State House. Obviously the main focus today is Professor Aghara's talk, but I do want to have the opportunity for each person here, if you're interested, just to share briefly, to introduce yourself, say the organization you're with, and if there's something you're working on in your community. I do want to give a huge thank you. This has taken many months of planning and presentation. So Megan Serino, my Director of Constituent Services and Environmental Liaison. So thank you so much, Megan, for your great work. And I think they might just be outside, but I have many great interns today. We have Josh Ludke and Willa Novell who are helping out. And I am going to talk a little bit about what's going on in Beacon Hill very briefly. Megan, if I can just get that information. So I would say that, as I've talked about before at these meetings, or a lot of times other meetings where I've seen a lot of people who are here. So in the legislature, on any topic, any sort of issue, you're always looking at, what are sort of the quote-unquote moving vehicles, what are the big bills that seem likely to pass, and how can you attach policy to that, or more investments, including around climate and environment. So for this session, I would say, thanks to Governor Healey's leadership, you have the environmental bond bill. So that's something, bond bills on a whole variety of topics, from housing to higher ed to the judicial system. Every 5 years, the state borrows money for investments in these areas. So this is the year, because the last time the environmental bond bill passed was 5 years ago. So the governor has passed an environmental bond bill. It's mostly investments in protecting open space, clean water, MVP, which I think probably a lot of people here are familiar with, Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, sort of to help with climate resiliency for cities and towns. So all those things, that money is just sort of reauthorized to spend money on. So obviously, as the Senate Chair of the Clean Energy Caucus, we want to keep those investments going. But it's also an opportunity for policy, I would say probably more on the environmental side than the climate side. So just a few examples of things, and I just met this week with Senator Becca Rausch, who's the Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Environment and Natural Resources. So we talked about my drought management bill, so we're hoping to get that passed. I have a bill to actually create more state funding for sustainability directors. So many towns, including now I think Sudbury, Wayland, Acton, have sustainability directors, but the reality is often communities that are less well off don't have that funding to jumpstart that effort. So should the state be providing some support there? So that's legislation that would hope to get into the bond bill. And then legislation such as regulating private wells, which is both recognizing that increasingly a lot of private wells have PFAS or other contaminants in it, and sometimes homeowners either don't do the testing or they're not aware of the contaminants in their well, and the state should provide a role for those homeowners who are less well off to help them clean up their wells. So all those bills and a few others are sort of in play, but I think probably if there's an opportunity to pass them, most of them would be attached to the environmental bond bill. Last session in the Senate climate bill, I was successful in passing the drought management bill, but unfortunately it didn't make it through the conference committee, which is a negotiation between the House and Senate. So that's why we're working on getting it into the environmental bond bill for this session. And then, as you know, I do a lot of work on, obviously, climate action. So we have a couple of major bills, which Senator Mike Barrett, the Senate Chair of the Telecommunications, Utility, and Energy Committee, has been very interested in. So two of them are an act facilitating distributed energy resources in the Commonwealth, which is basically solar power, and an act maximizing and optimizing small-scale assets in communities. So these are bills to look at how do we better support homeowners, businesses, cities and towns, nonprofits from being able to put up solar and benefit from solar, including recognizing that a lot of times there's a long delay in getting these projects approved at the local level. Last session, we passed a bill to speed up that process, but still at the local level, a lot of times it takes cities or towns, city halls, town halls, a long time to approve solar being allowed to be put up. So we're working to pass those pieces of legislation, and again, moving vehicle on the climate front. I think this session is Governor Healy has filed a bill around energy, both to address rising energy costs, but also to better support clean energy. So that's just two examples as far as the climate front. Also very proud to file, I would say, a bill that probably is going to take a few more years to organize around, though we are gathering more support, an act establishing a climate superfund, which is also known as the Make Polluters Pay Bill, which is, I know there'll be some support here for that. Stella, you have to calm down here. My goodness, never seen you so excited. So the climate superfund is similar to the federal superfund or CIRCLA Act passed in the federal government that cleaned up in my district, W.R. Grace, in South Acton, and also some parts of Devon's, the old military base, is recognizing that there has been an impact by oil and fossil fuel companies obviously on the world, on our country, on Massachusetts, and can there be a way to assess that damage and charge a fee or fines to the major oil companies, the major gas companies, to address everything from climate resiliency to the damage that carbon emissions has put upon Massachusetts. There are some estimates that this could be many billions of dollars that could be invested in communities, especially environmental justice communities. So that's been a great effort to be part of. Still lots of questions around it, but two other states have passed the bill. Vermont and New York have passed it last session, so there's definitely a lot of interest in that. So there's many other bills I filed, but I just wanted to give a sort of update on that, because I did want to have the opportunity for each person here, if you want, to introduce yourself if you're part of a group you're part of, and if there's some environment or climate initiative. And if you could just say that very briefly, and then we can move on to the main focus of today's presentation. So if you don't mind, we can start in the front. And Kate, would you like to speak?
Kate Wheeler, Maynard Sustainability Committee, and I guess we just got our first energy aggregation bill on our Eversource bill, so we're enjoying benefits of that.
That's great. Orion?
Orion Green, also Green Maynard.
Great, thanks, Orion. Lori?
Lori Nearing with PACE, People of Air Concerned About the Environment. We're working very hard to pass the bill to protect Massachusetts public health from PFAS, the forever chemical, and there's a whole lot of environmental groups working with us, and also the rodenticides, eliminate rodenticides.
Ken?
I'll address you. He knows what I'm doing. My name is Ken Brown. I have a company called Safe Hydrogen. I've been working on technology, storage technology to store electricity cheaply enough to remove intermittency from wind and solar, which can turn wind and solar farms into baseload generators or other load-following dispatchable sources. And solve some of the issues that we have where we've got too much intermittency in certain parts of the grid.
Great, thanks, Ken.
I'm Irv Rockwood. I'm from Ayer with the Sandy Pond School Association, and our primary interest is historic preservation. But you're also now the site of a pocket forest, one of 5 in the Ayer Devons area. And that gives us an opportunity to talk about environmental preservation as well. And what we aim to be doing is to develop a little program that people who come to the schoolhouse will also be able to go through the pocket forest and get a field guide that will help them to identify these plants, which are all native vegetation.
That was the Ayer Schoolhouse, is just such a hidden gem, so I recommend people checking it out, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Carolyn McCurry of Eco Nuclear Solutions, and you found a little card on your chair that says who we are. I would like to point out that once a month we have a video series going, and next month it's going to be on radioactivity, the truth about it, and the fear and the truth. So check out the website and come and see our videos. And if you're interested in being part of the organization, let me know.
Hi, I'm Rick Posh, and I'm familiar with the work of Eco Nuclear Solutions and supportive of the mission and what they're doing. I think it's very progressive and moving in a good direction. I'm here to learn what I can.
Great, thank you for coming. Yeah, appreciate it.
Michael Volk. I've worked in the nuclear industry for about 20 years for Yankee Atomic, Duke Engineering, and Arriva. I have a PE license in nuclear engineering. I'm a member of American Nuclear Society National, and also a member of the American Nuclear Society, the Northeast section, which serves Massachusetts and the rest of New England.
Thanks for being here.
I'm Jim Whalen. I'm a member of Green Hudson and also of Citizens Climate Lobby, and I'm just here to learn also.
Great, thank you. All right, in the back.
Sean Noyes, I'm part of Eco Nuclear Solutions. I'm also part of Generation Atomic. On the 13th of November, we're actually bringing in a speaker at UMASS Lowell with Dr. Sukesh over here, and they're going to talk about my favorite topic, what to do with spent nuclear fuel. So hope to see some of the folks in this room on that night. I'm working on the e-vite now.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alyssa Nickel, and I am Vice Chair on the Acton Select Board. One thing that I'm working on is getting to the Select Board PFAS-free policy, so that the town will look at finding PFAS-free things like solar panels and carpeting, et cetera, when they're doing their purchasing. I am also part of the Green Acton Water Committee, and Maynard folks, ORS, the Organization for the Assabet, Concord, and Sudbury Rivers, is looking for water monitors in Maynard. So contact ORS if you know anybody who'd want to do that weekly or monthly monitoring. ORS provides the training for that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sahana Purohit. I'm from Acton. I'm here to learn more about this topic.
All right, thank you.
And I'm Bob Ferrara. I have a couple of intersections here. One thing, I'm Jamie's treasurer. That's not why I'm here, because I have a long interest, or fairly sustained interest in nuclear fusion. One of my classmates is a major funder, Ryan Bukes, at MIT. Yeah. I've also known some of the principals that worked on the Spark project, which led to Commonwealth Fusion Systems, which we should visit. We should have a field trip out there. So, anyway.
Oh, Commonwealth Fusion, yep.
Commonwealth Fusion,
yep.
yeah, right in your district, so.
Yep, continues to expand, yeah.
I'm Stella Coe. I'm from Acton. I'm representing the Acton Climate Coalition in Indivisible Acton area, and we'd like to know how we can help push those bills through the Massachusetts legislature.
Great.
Dale Levandier. I live on the Ayer Littleton line, part of Eco Nuclear Solutions. A relationship also with PACE, which came mostly out of PFAS concerns, which are an issue at where I live at Spectacle Pond. Spectacle Pond Association got involved, and so we all sort of hooked up. And we have a private well that's contaminated above the MCL for Massachusetts. So I'm
Thank
just
you.
tagging along.
We can start in the back. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. I'm just an interested citizen from Maynard. I don't work on this professionally, but I'm interested in clean energy solutions.
Great. Thanks for being here.
Same.
I'm Josh. I'm one of Senator Eldridge's interns. I work on environmental policy. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm Willa. I'm also an intern with Senator Eldridge, and I'm also excited to be here.
I'm Zach, half here as the husband of Megan, and other half as a proponent and supporter of nuclear.
Bruce?
Sure, I should say the same thing. I'm Bruce Leisher. I'm married to Ellen Sackler. Who runs the climate initiatives at Harvard, but I serve on the Bear Hill Pond Watershed Management Committee, which has been restoring the Bear Hill Pond watershed for many years with a lot of assistance from Jamie and his team with grants. I also serve on the town's Transportation Advisory Committee. We've been working with all kinds of green transportation solutions.
I'm Todd Sauter. I'm just a neighbor here on Shattuck Street and an interested citizen.
Great, thanks for coming.
Mike Duclos. I'm on Stowe's Sustainable Stowe's Green Advisory Committee. I'm a member of the Heat Smart Alliance, which is an organization helping homeowners to make a transition from fossil fuel heating to heat pumps. And I've been listening in on the Echo Nuclear Solutions monthly meetings.
Great, thank you.
Cynthia Knapp. So I've been involved in various environmental groups, most recently Eco Nuclear Solution. Very happy.
My name is Annie Reed. I'm from Ayer, and I'm also a member of Eco Nuclear Solutions. And last week I went to State House to meet with members of the TUE, which is the Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy Committee, I believe.
Right, yes, yep.
And distribute books to them and their aides, and just be a resource for any questions they have, and advocate for more nuclear in the energy mix.
Hi everyone, I'm Divya Chandra and I'm a research scholar at New York University. I work with the Center for Sustainable Business and we work essentially on advancing decarbonization with corporates. So it could be any kinds of organizations. We also work with private equity, focusing on the value creation from sustainability so as to advance more investment in this space. And I live in Acton. I follow Energize Acton so I participate to the extent I can. It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Cami Bean. I'm here from Littleton. I'm on the Clean Lakes Committee in town. So for those of you who have water, I'd like to talk to you. For sure, we're mostly focused on invasive mitigations in the watershed here. My father, incidentally, was a nuclear engineer. He was a submariner who studied under Rickover back in the day. So I grew up with nuclear in the family, but I know nothing. So very excited to be here.
I'm kind of short, so I'm going to stand up. I'm Sarah Van Bakker, Littleton Sustainability Committee. What we're working on is we actually, next week at our town meeting, we have a climate emergency declaration that hopefully the town will be passing. And I just wanted to welcome everyone to the new center on Shattuck, which is our new senior center. And maybe you noticed the solar panels outside. Jamie had a lot to do with us being able to put those on. And I just wanted to let you all know that you are in an all-electric building, that all summer the electric bills have been about $50 a month.
Wow. Thank you, Sarah. And if I can add to that, just so folks know, thinking about each of your communities, is that Sarah and her husband, Mark, who not only involved with climate action, but in the center in the Reuben Hoare Library, is that when they were under construction, both of them asked myself and Rep. Arciero to secure earmarks, which is a fixed amount of money for a project in the budget for the solar panels on both the Reuben Hoare Library and here on this center. So he's secured that funding, and that's why you have the solar panels. So certainly any new buildings in your communities, please think about that and be in touch with me. So thanks again, Sarah.
Thank you
Yep.
so much.
Mhm. Tina?
Morning, I'm Tina Grasowski. I live in Hudson, a longtime former resident in Acton. I'm here with Green Hudson, which is the climate sustainability group in Hudson. And we're working on the second iteration of the Heat Smart, Cool Smart program, which was an outreach to get residents to switch from gas to heat pumps. And we work together with Stowe and Hudson on that. I'm also here leadership team and legislative team with Elders Climate Action, which is a statewide group that works on legislative advocacy, and we're really working hard to get those bills passed at the State House.
Yes, thank you. Carol?
I'm Carol Lynn. I'm with Sustainable Stowe. We recently tabled at Hudson Light and Power is our provider for electricity, and it's nuclear power. And we tabled, we had a whole bunch of handouts on all kinds of different heat pumps, so hot water heat pumps and air source heat pumps. And so we did that. We have monthly talks that we have experts on different fields come and well, now it's all done on Zoom, but they used to come in person. But we do it on Zoom, and they talk about different topics, and it's everything from energy and power to plants. It just, there's a whole range. They're all recorded, and they're up on our Stowe, trying to think of the name of the site. It's on our Stowe TV site. So there's a whole list, and we've been doing this for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. So there's a whole range of topics you can go out and listen to experts talk about. And then the other thing that we've been starting to work with the schools on is creating a pollinator pathway throughout Stowe. I don't know if many of you have heard about this, but Connecticut has a pollinator pathway that crosses the entire state. And they kind of started this idea, and it's going across the country now. And it's set up for different pollinators have different distances that they can travel to get their pollen. So some can only go, 300 feet. Some, like monarchs, can go like 3,000 feet between getting their pollen. So when you build a pollinator pathway, you have to factor in all of those, the different distances that different types of pollinators travel. And it doesn't have to be gardens. It can be gardens. It can be, if you're a storefront, you can put pollinator plants in your storefront, little pots. So that as long as there's hopping room, so they can hop from plant to plant, you can build this pathway. And we're having a pollinator crash in the United States right now. And so one of the things that, states are trying to step up to try to restore the ecosystem for our pollinators.
That's awesome. Thanks, Carol.
Yeah,
that's excellent.
Big deal.
I'm Paul Reitzberg. I'm with Elders Climate Action. I'm Brian. I'm a Littleton resident, and I've had the opportunity to work with Sukesh a little bit in my role at UMASS Chan Medical School in part of looking at our various options and strategies for decarbonization of that campus.
Excellent. Seems like Dr. Aghara, there's a lot of fans of yours here, so. Impressive.
I did not send an email to any of them. I need to learn.
That's great. Well, I thanks everybody for talking about what you're working on, and as hopefully you already get is that, one of the best parts of the GAC is sharing information about, what everyone's working on, getting brainstorming on new ideas, and make sure we have your email so that you can be in touch with other members who are here. I do want to mention just on the Clean Energy Caucus front, just so you have a sense of what I do as the Senate chair, beyond sort of, advocating for bills and filing bills and gatherings like this, is that the caucus has monthly briefings. So on Wednesday, again, thanks to Megan, we have a briefing on sustainability directors. So as I mentioned, more and more communities are hiring sustainability directors. I continue to believe the state needs to provide more support, especially for less well-off communities. But we have the sustainability directors for Acton, Wayland, and I think Cambridge speaking this Wednesday at the State House about, sustainability directors and how they're funded and the different work that they do. So that's one of the Clean Energy Caucus briefings that we have coming up. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sukesh Aghara. He directs the Integrated Nuclear Security and Safeguards Laboratory at UMASS Lowell and serves as a Nuclear Security Fellow with the Center for Terrorism and Security Studies, which sounds very intimidating, Dr. Aghara. So everybody be very focused on his remarks. So Professor Aghara co-directs the Intercontinental Nuclear Institute, an IAEA-funded international training program in nuclear technology, and as an internationally recognized expert on this subject matter, Professor Aghara will discuss nuclear reactor applications for decarbonization initiatives focusing on harnessing nuclear energy to promote human-scale sustainability in communities throughout our country and across the world. So please welcome Professor Aghara.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, good morning, everyone. When you know who's in the crowd, it actually is more intimidating than not knowing who's in the crowd. And clearly, you're here on a Saturday morning, so you're already committed to your passion, and so I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Senator Eldridge and Megan, for making this happen. I have been a true engineer and scientist all my life, and I have starting to realize as I come into my midlife that you can have the best technology, but if people do not understand it and accept it, it remains in the labs. And so I was very afraid of public speaking. I could speak with slides on a technical topic quite easily, but I have learned to engage, and I have actually come to appreciate how much an impact it can have. So I think among many folks who have invited me to speak in these kinds of settings, I think EcoNuclear does get a shout out for first reaching out to me on a random call. And I'm often afraid of taking random calls, but it was Carol, and I have a Carol in a friend and a chairman of one of the departments. So I was like, I should call back Carol. And it turns out Carolyn was calling, and then she started talking about nuclear, and I'm like, all right, well, now I should get into my comfort space. But anyway, so it's been wonderful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. My son hopefully will do fantastically today in a soccer game. He often does when I'm not around. So it's no pressure. Senator Eldridge asked me, do you do this kind of stuff? And I said, yes. When I moved here to the state of Massachusetts in 2012, I was young then, and I felt like I could walk on water. I was just coming off of a NASA Administrator's Fellow. I was, some of my work was being driving the decisions on space exploration for the next 10 years, as it turned out. And so I was like, I can do this. And everybody's like, are you crazy moving from Texas to Massachusetts and you want to be a nuclear engineer? I'm like, hey, what's the worst that can happen? I'll move again, right? Well, I am humbled that there is a lot going on nationally, there's a lot going on internationally, and there's a lot going on in New England. And so I think this is a great moment for us as we are looking towards how we can intelligently be at the table and drive the decisions of how nuclear energy gets deployed. I love being in Massachusetts because we are a naturally high IQ populace. We like to question things, and we are very much a community-based governance, which is very different. It's a lot easier to get stuff done in Texas where I was because it is an energy-forward state. All of the above was a national mantra, and we didn't mind making major investments. And if you look at just the scales of economy, right? I mean, state of Texas is close to $300 billion of economy. We're about $60 billion of economy. But we are very, technology, innovation focused economy. So I think there are lots of things that really inform the way I'm starting to develop the ideas as to how we move forward with
with our needs. So I'm in the midst of a nuclear institute that I've been running for the last 10 years. Essentially, I had to find something to do interesting when I was in Massachusetts outside of my research. And so I found this opportunity to work with the international nuclear community. And so there was a lot of work, if you look back to 2010, on nuclear energy external to the United States. Then we started to finally, after 30 years or 32 years of not building nuclear power plants, we started to actually decide to build nuclear power plants. And like all engineering, and any of you who've been a gearhead, it's very difficult to take something that is on paper, that's something in a lab, in a controlled environment, to now do it at scale. And so if you look at the Vogtle plants, which are the AP1000, the most advanced pressurized water reactor design, we were building 4 of them in China. And we used to talk about how we were building these plants in China. And the APR 1400s, which is the South Korean design based off of the Westinghouse. Westinghouse design, I think somebody talked about the naval reactors. It is the design that drives 435 reactors in the world today. They're all basically inspired by that design. We own it. And it is time for us to start showing that we are at the table. There is no other country, and I travel the world, that takes responsible actions on impact to ecology, human factors, and safety than us. So when we're not at the table, we allow folks that would be able to make reactors that will still impact the rest of the world. So I think that's why when we finally build the 2 nuclear power plants in Georgia, and we embrace it, right? We don't have a way to hide anything. In China, you don't know when it happens and how it happened, right? And that's just the way the economy works. I'm not saying anything about the culture. Here, it's just impossible to hide anything. So when it took me, the industry twice as long to build that first reactor and costs twice as much than the initial, it was out there, right? And it's a blow you gotta take. And it was a lot of embarrassment. You gotta find a way to say, hey, how am I gonna do this? But what's so great about the Americans? We accept what's not working, we talk about it, and we fix it. And so when you build a second one, the Unit 4, it was half the time and 40% reduction in cost. And that's real engineering. It does not happen perfectly the first time, right? If that happened, we would do it all the time. So, but I think now you're gonna see about 8 to 10 new projects coming up in the United States. I think we are back with a roar. I think things are moving really interestingly, and it's not an accident I'm gonna talk about those things. So while we were sitting dormantly for 30 plus years, we were doing all kinds of really amazing things, right? There's a lot of things that were happening in our labs, in our academic institutions. We continue to invest in research, and in spite of the fact that we have a moratorium in this state, we still have the 2 nuclear engineering departments that graduate nuclear engineering students that actually go to the other 5 states in the region. In fact, we are the only nuclear engineering departments in the New England states that continue to produce nuclear engineers. We need to own that, right? We need to wave that flag. We're putting not only folks in the new region, but we also graduating students, from UMass Lowell, from MIT with nuclear engineering degrees that are, running the world. Right? That's one of our biggest exports, right? We are really good at it. We have some of the best academic institutions in the world, and we continue to do that. So we've been doing some amazing research. We've been doing some amazing development. It is time to also start thinking about how we take advantage of the broader macroeconomics of nuclear energy, right? And I'll show you why it's really important that we should participate in this thing. So there's a lot of work that I've been doing in nuclear security, non-proliferation, essentially ensuring that the technology is used for non-weapons application. And honestly, the rest of the world has come to appreciate what reliable energy can mean to you, right? The quality of life is just absolutely intimately attached to the way that you can have access to energy. And so I think there's more and more growing interest in not looking at nuclear as a way to become a deterrent for a nuclear weapons program. And countries like Saudi Arabia, countries like UAE, they are now saying, listen, there is a finite resource in my oil wells. I need to figure out a way. And my populace is demanding a better quality of life. They like driving cars. They love air conditioning in the heat. They do not live in tents anymore, and they consume energy. They like to use a microwave when they can. These things require energy, and you're going to have to come up with a way to make it happen. So yeah, I mean, I can argue all day long that we are amazing, we're great, but then there's all these things that everybody carries their image with, right? We've got an accident that everybody recognizes, we have more than 100 reactors operating in this country. In fact, I'll put up a Seabrook picture, and most of you may not recognize it. But all of you will recognize Fukushima. I mean, I had a hard time saying Fukushima. I bet you most of you also had the same, but we now can roll it off our tongue like that, right? Why? Because one accident, it becomes such a big event, everybody wants to talk about it. So this is a legacy issue with nuclear. We need to be able to talk about this in a responsible way. There's nothing that we can hide, but we also have now more than 60 years of experience. We have been storing nuclear spent fuels safely. We have been responsible, and we have been engaged with the public, and we are allowed the public to question some of the shortcuts that naturally anybody who is interested in making money may first be inclined, right? Passive least resistance is the first choice when you're making a strictly economic decision. But if you now force that economic decision with additional, constraints, you make a better choice, right? If I was just making a decision based on budget, I will always choose the cheapest flight, and then my wife asks me, why are you going on Spirit Airways? What are you gonna do about the bags? And I'm like, well, but it was only a $59 flight. And then it's like, well, we're gonna take 4 bags with us, and then you do the cost analysis, and you're like, okay, well, maybe let's go JetBlue. So that is the important thing, right? You need to have a community dialogue that is involving people, so that we are not ignoring things, but it is the only energy technology. That's, you can be pro or anti-nuclear, it doesn't matter. This is the only energy technology that has a cradle-to-grave requirement with money put aside to deal with all of it. There is no other technology that has that, okay? And that you cannot take away, it's a fact. You're responsible as an industry for every electron that you put on the grid using nuclear to be responsible for the mining of the uranium that comes out of the ground to the disposal of spent fuel. And there's money set aside, which is why this is possible, right? And that is a responsibility, a burden that remains. We can talk all day long. There's all kinds of reasons why I would be very much questioning nuclear, right? In fact, I have a 13 and a 15-year-old kids, and they have friends. And they ask me, oh, yeah, what about this? I'm like, well, listen, neither of you have any superpowers. I've been working in the nuclear industry with radiological material all my life. Neither do I. I can't fly anywhere except a plane. And so, and both of you are actually very perfectly average, which is a good thing. Right? No physical attributes that could be, some kind of a radiation spider, or any kind of an abnormality. So I think that there is a lot of now proven records as compared to what we were doing back in the 50s, where there may be a question, what could this do, right? But now I think we have actual working professionals with documented radiation measurements and understanding of how we do this responsibly. So again, these are not completely resolved from a public perception point of view, and that is part of our job to do. So I would say I'm not impressed, and I'm hoping that the next 45 minutes or so, if you can last through all of it, I think we have enough coffee, that we will hopefully at least come to the table saying, you know what, you got my attention. Let's talk about how we could do this, right? And that's my goal for today. So why are we talking about this today, right? Why were we not talking about this 10 years ago? Why were we not talking about this 15 years ago? Well, there was a lot of issues with the nuclear industry trying to figure out how to do this responsibly, carefully, and consistently. I think we've taken strides in our operational records. We've done amazing with our regulatory requirements. We've learned as an industry, we've learned as a regulator how to make that decision of which flight you're going to take based on what you need, right? So I think if we start to look at some of the things that are really now driving the decisions of where we are and how we are going to be able to achieve some of the common goals that I think you can be on either side of the climate. Again, I don't take positions on climate. One thing is certain, whether you believe that carbon emission can global warm, global cool, the fact is, when I burn something, I'm releasing carbon dioxide, right? So when you have something chemically trapped, you're untrapping it. That's a fact. So let's figure out if we can do it without releasing the carbon dioxide, right? I don't want to debate whether it's good or bad. Let's talk about why don't we leave it there, because we may be able to do it in a different way, right? So I have solar panels up on my rooftop. I absolutely love it. Why not, right? Sun shines, and there's amazing tax credits. I'm going to put it up there. I have, I have battery storage. Why not? There is a way to do it. But I looked at, and I have a electrically cooled atmospheric heat pump, right? But I have a 50-year-old house, and I am, UMass Lowell takes care of me, so I have an ability to offset the costs that I may get if I actually had the income and the tax liabilities to get the full advantage of the deferment, right? But as you get to a 100-year-old house, which we have many of in this country, in this region, you're starting to see some of the diminishing return and the cost of capital investment that you're going to have to do in order to achieve the things that we want. A building like this, beautiful. If you're building from ground up, you can do a lot of different things to make it happen. I grew up in India. We understood sustainability naturally because we didn't have electricity. Basically, 2 days a week, we didn't have electricity. 1 day a week, we didn't have electricity to run factories. I mean, that was just basically the way it was designed. Nobody had air conditioning in the house. There was no microwave. The way you cook is, what days you're not going to have electricity, right? But now, once you make energy reliable and resilient, you have a dependency. And that dependency has to be affordable because you are now otherwise going to put that gap between people who can afford it and people who cannot, right? And that's very important for us to understand as we start to strategize around energy affordability, sustainability, and clean energy. And that's why we're going to be starting on these things. So for years and years, we had essentially a drop in load demand, right? Which is great. We were so aggressive in the region. We were spending a lot of money on energy efficiencies, and the leaderships of senators and legislators and the governors in the past were doing everything that we could to press that energy demand down. Fantastic. But here's the ISO's current projections in terms of what's going on, right? And these projections are real, right? I mean, if you were telling me, what's the weather forecast 10 years ago, it's a hit or miss in terms of what you're guessing even next 6 hours. I think you can almost be 100% guaranteed when you look at your phone and it says 15% chance of rain. I'll bet you $100 that there'll be at least 2 drops that'll come out in that next hour, right? Why? Why is that happening? Our models are getting amazingly good, right? We have developed the models that are now relying on multiple data sources that gives you that confidence. So as this energy forecasting, ISO is getting better. They're not going to be so off on forecasting what the needs are. So I think these are important parameters for us to have better confidence in the data that we're looking at, right? Back in the old days, you have to trust your personal physician because he knew you. He saw you when he was a kid, and he knows if your heart rate's off because he's going by feel, right? Now we're going by data. And that data quality has to be important. The models that you build on the data are critically important as we start to forecast into the future. So if you start to look at some of the key parameters here that I want to point out to is as we go into the electrification, one of the things that's going to happen is we're going to put more load on the electrical grid. And so that's good and bad, right? Depends on how you look at it. All those behind the meter PVs, some that I have, doing wonderfully well in summer, right? There is just nothing that the technology can do when the sun just doesn't shine long enough, right? So I'm going to have an offset load that's going to have to be taken care of, right? So if you look at this just in the general sense, you're looking at about 200 megawatts, 2,000 megawatts, is 2 gigawatts of differential in power just from PV. I think senators' initiatives and others, PV makes a lot of sense, especially in rooftops. Let's do it, right? But once you put that out, ISO actually has a duck curve that tells you what's going to happen. And so, well, we're not stupid, we know how to do that, so we're not gonna have to add storage, right? The storage is expensive, storage is short-term. I have a whole group working on long-term storage that will help you with those offsetting of energy, right? As you get more and more renewable in weather conditions not like California, you're gonna have to figure out a way to offset the demand off using. Somebody said about hydrogen storage, we've got a group that's working on hydrogen storage. There's other ways to do storage, there's something called thermal energy storage systems. We are doing innovation. We are working on ways, we know that's a genuine problem that we need to solve. But no matter how you look at things, if you start to look at electrification of your heating source, right? New England is a unique load curve as compared to some of the other states, all right? We are actually energy dominant in the winter, right? Our demand curves are high in the winter because we use a lot of energy to keep ourselves warm. And that's where you're gonna have some competition because you're gonna take some of your renewable offload and you're gonna have to kind of, your days are longer, right? So your storage solutions have to be not in terms of hours, not in terms of days. It needs to be stretched over weeks and months. And that's a very different engineering challenge, right? I mean, I could put a lot of panels up on my rooftop and I can have a lot of, a whole wall of storage. But it's really sort of starts there as a capital investment that starts to diminish return because of the technology, right? My technology solution is right now in terms of hours. So each battery is basically giving me some amount of hour stretch goals, not days and weeks. So those are kinds of things that we really need to sort of communicate with the audience. We need to embrace where some of the technology solutions may be, but we can't be waiting for that. If you start to electrify everything and start putting solar panels up, you're gonna stress the grid, right? And what are you gonna do about it? So we can't just do one thing and then hope the other thing will work, right? It's, again, going back to that Spirit airline. I mean, if you don't have any bags to take and you're just going for a day trip, great, buy that $59 ticket. But you can't just pretend that you're gonna go on this 3-week trip to Iceland and think that you're gonna just not have the cost associated with it, right? So you gotta have a full cost accounting. So as you start to look at this thing a little bit more deeply, you start to understand several different parameters that are changing. And most importantly, if you look at the net on the summer to winter months, there is one unique thing that's gonna happen. We are actually gonna have an electrical load that comes up on both summer and winter, okay? That has a number of different ramifications in terms of how you do energy planning, right? But that's one reason why nuclear becomes more sensible, right? Nuclear does best when it operates all the time. It will actually provide energy affordability and will take the pressure off of your intermittent sources coming on board, right? You will actually stretch your ability to offset your energy storage solutions as you start to bring them on, and you can truly get to that decarbonized grid, right? So renewable and nuclear are not at conflict. There has been a perception and understanding, and that is actually true for even nuclear engineers who were thinking renewables were at conflict with nuclear. Renewable folks were thinking it's a conflict. It's not. Actually, it's a partnership. It is really the way that both of us can help each other. And then it will actually open up other opportunities, right? Hydrogen can help you tremendously on the transportation sector. There are other ways in which, if you can get your head out of the natural gas scenario, you can start to solve. And we're not even touching the peak of all of the other things that we are consuming tremendous amount of carbon. So I want to go back, in time to 1982, right? Life was very simple. We were using energy in primarily biomass, right? Back in the good old days, you burned a bunch of wood in your house, keep a nice fireplace, warm fireplace. Worked, right? And our consumption was mainly, we were doing all that biomass and we were basically cooling our homes, and we were not an industrialized nation, right? And we basically had an agro, very little industry, and most of transportation was all basically not relying on any kind of concentrated energy source, all right? We started to get sophisticated. We started to add electricity. By the way, in that 1882, it was a one bulb that we put up on electricity. That's how we started to think about electricity, right? Thomas Edison said, hey, so now, this new form of energy sort of manifested itself into our culture. And you really have to, I mean, you can't do it because you're just fortunate to have been born here. I have an appreciation for what it means when on Wednesdays you don't have electricity, right? It changes everything. We used to live on the 4th floor, so you even have to plan out that you're not gonna have an elevator, so you're gonna make sure that the old person that's not out that day, because they're not gonna be able to get upstairs. And that was a good thing, because we knew that we didn't have the electricity, right? And then we had all of these other times when we actually had intermittent power outages, which is where you didn't have a plan. We essentially had a very unreliable grid and a very low capacity for electricity, right? Why am I talking about that? We are not gonna get there. Why I'm talking about it is, once you become dependent on an energy source, you start to have your entire life, your systems, everything that is dependent on it, right? Brian's talking to me, not because I've not known Brian. The medical school has a huge demand for reliability. All of our electronic, I mean, you know, our life support systems, everything is using electricity. They need to have a backup source and a backup to the backup source that they can't rely on, because now there are patients that are going to be dependent on this, right? So there are things that we've built, an infrastructure that's starting to look like this. So back in the 1950s, well, yeah, intermittent electricity, no big deal, right? Let's fast forward to 2019.
I have a question on the previous slide.
Sure.
Your nuclear, the nuclear, hydro, and wind basically produce electricity.
Yeah.
And so you don't have any energy loss to go from what's generated in the wind farm, except for line loss and minor things. But your natural gas, coal, and petroleum essentially produce heat. And then you have to run the heat through a heat engine to get you to your end use. You don't have any lines here for the energy that gets thrown away.
Right,
Would that make it clearer, or do you think it would confuse things?
So so the objective of these lines are to show how the total energy consumption as a human race starts to change. But what you're talking about is to actually get into the nitty-gritty of where your loss terms are and how they get transformed. So absolutely.
Because to say, for instance, the brown line goes into commercial and mostly industrial. But if you factor for the heat, it would be 3 times larger, because you throw away 2/3 by using the heat engine.
Yeah, and so absolutely. So I think if you actually develop additional specific lines on looking at the electrical heating system, for instance, and then looking at how you're getting that electricity, yes, there will be that basically 60% loss that you would capture. So here we're kind of just looking at the aggregate totals and just getting an appreciation for how we are diversifying the way that we are consuming energy and diversifying the way that the applications of those energies are going, right? So just broad picture in terms of just total energy consumption. But you're absolutely correct. There are other ways in which we can do this. But essentially, if you start to look at where is all the innovation happening, right? We are learning more and more, spending more and more time figuring out how to produce electricity reliably, responsibly, and integrating that into everything. And now, as EVs are coming on board, transportation sector is also dependent on electricity, right? So electrification is a forward motion. And so you can really kind of get excited about all this stuff, and you start to comprehensively look at where everything is and how these things are moving. But what I want to draw your attention to right now is we've done a great job of, at least in this region, to basically zero out coal. Great, I think that's fantastic. That's the worst of the carbon-based source that you could potentially use, right? But we're still predominantly a carbon fossil-based economy, okay? Which is why I feel nuclear and renewable can be best buddies for the next 50 years, and we will not run out of business, because there is so much of runway that we can be impacting, right? We are predominantly still a petroleum-based economy for transportation. We are predominantly natural gas-based for a lot of our electricity generation, and you've not even touched all of the stuff that's going on in the industry, heat, transportation. So I think a lot of what we've been doing in the last 25 years, even regionally, has been fantastic, but it's mostly on maybe, at scale to a commercial residential, right? To make that impact on industrial, it's gonna take significant effort. And then this sector is continuing to grow, right? So you're about 30% of energy is being used from electricity. So what are you starting to see? You're starting to see for years, this is ISO New England, right? We did a great job of reducing our load curves, right? There were a number of reasons for it. One, efficiency improvements. Two, industry was moving away from here, okay? I mean, I bought a $200,000 house in Texas for, that was 3,500 square feet. And it was a sticker shock for me when I moved here. And the realtor said, what are you looking for? So I told her, this is my budget. And she goes, no, what do you have right now? I said, well, I paid $200,000 for it. I have a 3,500 square feet home. I'd love to have a bedroom on the downstairs, one bedroom on the upstairs. And she goes, that's gonna be difficult. And I said, I understand, standard of living's higher here, so I'm factoring in a 25% increase. She's like, more. More. I'm like, okay, well, so I told my wife, I'm like, we gotta double the budget on this thing. She goes, what do you mean double the budget? I'm like, listen, you can't buy anything that we want for $400,000, unless we go to $400,000. She showed us like 50 homes, and we finally ended up paying more than $600,000. So she's like, this is crazy. I'm like, this is what you're gonna have to pay, honey, otherwise, you're gonna be driving. So what we're doing is we have to understand that as you start to sort of map out how you're gonna embrace this cost and how you're gonna come up with a way to tackle it in a very mature, environmental conscious, right? I mean, I love the fact that I have an acre and a half around me. I love the fact that we have a septic tank. I love the fact that we oppose natural gas lines coming into my home. But then I also don't like the fact that I have an oil burning furnace, right? So what do I do, right? I mean, where do I go? And that's not a cheap solution, right? I mean, that's at least a $25,000 to $30,000 expense. And maybe I can absorb it, plan it out, take a few of those Spirit flights, but not everybody's gonna be able to do that, right? And so those are kind of some of the things that you have to really think about. So there is a load growth that is obviously sort of staring in our face, and that's one thing that we really think about. So here is, guess what? Massachusetts is the largest energy consumer on the ISO grid, right? So we should be either proud or embarrassed, however you want to be, but Massachusetts takes up a lot of electrical load in the region, all right? Which is why we also have the biggest proposed new energy on the grid, all right? And it was a big significant step for the governor last year when and we were alienating our friends on both sides of the border, right? Because we had a very strong position on nuclear, but we neglected the fact that we were very happy to take this nuclear energy in spite of the fact that we closed our plant without giving any credit to it, right? And so essentially the two governors were not happy about that, right? New Hampshire and Connecticut. And this is just good, friendly neighborly friends, right? I mean, you gotta be nice to your neighbors. You can't just say, well, this is my high ground, I don't care what you guys think, but then by the way, I'm gonna take everything that you're producing anyway. So that was an important step for us to build better relationships on this issue as a regional partner, right? As a major off-taker of electricity on that grid. And so when the governor gave the nuclear clean energy credit, it allowed us to enter into a conversation with those folks. But we're gonna, we could make some significant impact. And like I said, unless you're at the table, you're not dictating what's coming onto the table, all right? So it is time for us to stop thinking that we could just be an obstructionist and still drive decision-making. We need to be at the table, state our positions, but also have to be willing to listen to positions, right? We cannot always be dictating. And that's an humbling experience. I mean, as an American, when I'm out in international societies, 30 years ago, 25 years ago, we were so far ahead in technology, we could dictate whatever the heck we want. Not anymore, all right? We can't do that. I mean, there was there was no conversation with the Indians. Indians were in the nuclear doghouse, and they didn't have anywhere else to go, right? But today, that's not the case, right? I mean, the Russians are selling out reactors at a cheaper price and a proven technology. The Chinese are selling them out, the Koreans are. I mean, the Koreans are the ones who built the PWR reactors that we designed, and we still have the most engineers who know how to do that design anywhere in the world. But the Koreans got the contract at UAE, okay? 51% of total engineering done in Korea was actually by American engineers, because we are still best at it, right? But who are dictating the terms? The Koreans were, right? So you diminish your influence as you step away from it. And that is a most important thing. This is the stuff that I kind of did with my nuclear non-proliferation safeguards, right? Like, that's my experience that is now I'm bringing to nuclear energy. You cannot influence where you're gonna go if you're not at the table, right? There's only so much you can do.
Oh, question.
Yeah.
Is there any nuclear included in that new proposed 20,903
So-
megawatts in Massachusetts?
That's a really good question, right? And so one thing that it does do, right? So as I give a whole lecture on ISO. Actually, I've been on a fantastically learning curve on all of these issues, because I feel like I have to understand them in order to talk about them. So each state kind of can have various different state incentives and priorities and policies that drive what generation capacity the states are going to incentivize. And then ISO does not say which one, they just, collate, right? So this report says, all right, Massachusetts is planning to put about 21,000 megawatts of energy on the grid. But when the governor took the position that nuclear can now be recognized, right? So that opens the aperture. But we still have a moratorium on new nuclear. So, what does that really mean? In fact, I'm on a fast legal learning terms of all these terminologies that the senator probably understands that I have to understand as well to properly explain. But so I think in principle, we can at least take credit for nuclear to be clean, but I don't know if we can, at least I know we can't build new nuclear until that legislature is changed.
When we look at those energy loads for the different states and we compare it to the population, is it true that Massachusetts per person is still spending a lot more than the other states around us?
I suspect that that's true, yes. And that's because, our industrial and commercial, not industrial, but commercial load is probably pretty high just in the metropolitan Boston.
Okay. Massachusetts population is quite a bit higher than Connecticut's,
Yeah.
for example. Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, you just mentioned about the state and the legality. I know that Governor Healy recently asked you to help out with, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, about a new study or research or commission, either now or later in your talk. It'd be great to hear about.
Yeah, so I do have a few slides on that as well. And I was trying to find the ground about where I land a lot of my comments. So I think I can kind of scale up and down, but I'll definitely try to get to the discussion on the roadmap.
I just wanted to, you mentioned earlier that electrification is expensive, affording heat pumps and putting solar panels on your roof.
Can you speak up?
Sorry. He mentioned the expense of electrifying, various things in your home, heat pumps, solar panels, your.
Yeah, there's a capital cost associated with electrification.
Right, there's a capital cost associated, but also Massachusetts has the second highest electricity rates in the nation after California. So that's a real disincentive if you're somebody who, can't really afford to upgrade your utilities. And so I think, we have to figure out a way to have more supply where it can be cost effective.
Absolutely, and I think this is a more of a comprehensive view on things, right? So we got to figure out a way to manage the cost of electricity, which I think the Governor Healy has taken a position on making energy affordable. And that's very important because you're not just talking to Littletons and Actons and Westfords and North Andover's and Andover's, but we need to look at the rest of the state. And some of the costs to entry for adapting clean technology is still there. And there's only so much we're gonna be able to do just from a state initiative's point of view, right? And so that creates some pressure. So yes, you can't just tackle it on one end, we gotta tackle it on the other end. And I'm sure that's where the legislature and the population, I mean, as you start to get, your arms around the whole issue, you gotta figure out. So
Right,
one
well,
way
if
that
there's
you can
more
tackle those
supply,
things.
I mean, if there's more supply, then
And a diversity of
Towards more
supply, so that kind of helps with the competition of energy. And honestly, you can play in different markets on intermittent supply to baseload supply, and then that kind of makes the mix better. So the other thing that I think is also very unique, and I'll go a little faster here, to this region is we have an extreme weather that we have to tackle, right? So here's here's what the electricity mix looks like on December 2017 from 1st to the 26th, okay? You have to actually go and look very closely. That was the oil-based fired energy on the system. We basically don't use it, it's just our backup supply, right? So 0.3%. But from 26th of December to January 9th, 27%. Because that's the only way I can offset my electricity demand, right? Because when you look at the ISO's supply chain, in fact, if this group has not done that, you should look. It's amazing, the data and what you can see. So when you have all of this, generation capacity, you're also kind of planning on this backup supply, right? And so it's when you're planning for these kinds of extreme events, you will see that. One of my students actually done a complete carbon emission correlation with just the load curves on a day-to-day basis, right? And you see that those are completely, there isn't a better correlation, because as soon as you get onto the peak loads, you obviously are gonna be, offsetting with your most available supply, right? You can't call wind and solar whenever you want it. And so you are gonna call natural gas and oil to offset your loads. Ideally, that's why, we understand this. This is why Massachusetts had the most aggressive energy storage initiatives in the last 5-year planning cycle. And we have the largest growth in the energy storage solution. But what we are not really fully appreciating is that we are actually putting up a lot of that solid state battery. There's gonna be an environmental burden on that as we go forward. Like your Duracell batteries, at some point, these are not infinitely available to you. And so you're gonna have to have a recycling plan in place, right? We used to chuck those batteries in the trash can, right? As my kids started to grow up, they're using more and more different things, which means I'm buying, by the boatload, the Duracell batteries at Costco, right? So again, I think the realities of engineering solutions are very important to embrace, because we can't really just sort of, pay our way out of it.
We have to
So
reduce
what's the 27%? What does the 27% represent over the 12-month period?
And I have that number somewhere, because we are looking at it year over year as well, because, not just this, but essentially, the point that I'm making here is that when we have these swings, right, you have to figure out how do you have capacity available, quick response times.
But if you're building the base, you're always gonna have the swings above and below the base, so it's.
Correct. So what you ideally want to do is have a base that is as much, if not all, clean energy source, right? So that's the goal. If you want to get to carbon neutral and then to carbon zero. And then you would just do the peak shavings using some kind of a storage solution, right? That's in a more simplistic way. It's not that simple. To take off 51% of natural gas off your grid is not an easy, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do it. It took me a while to buy one electric car, right? Because you can't just, there's all these other costs and lifestyle changes that are associated with it, right?
No, this is more like a plug-in hybrid.
Right.
But that may be very efficient.
So,
There's also energy loss associated with storage solutions, right? Both putting it into storage and taking it back out.
yeah, those cycles, there's the technology itself, there's a lot that we can talk about there. So there's a life cycle loss, there's an efficiency loss, there's lots of things that happen. That doesn't mean it's not a good solution. It is a solution that we should pursue, and that's why we're looking at alternatives to just solid state batteries, right?
And everybody, we have to reduce the peak.
And we need to reduce the peaks, or levelize the peaks. But that's also, again, one of those things that, individual actions are great. I think that's what we can do through community engagement, right? But you can't rely on individual actions as a strategy for large-scale planning, right? And that's where I feel that we have to sort of accept, because the lifestyle changes have a timeline, and it really depends a lot on advocacy, choices, how you shape people's actions. But that can't be your primary strategy as to what you're gonna do. So you do need to continue to invest in your technology solutions while you're doing this to hopefully get to that middle ground. All right. Again, other thing that is actually driving massive load demands is data centers, all right? For most of you, if you could kind of just think back 15 years ago, Google it was not a term, right? Most of you knew how to, in fact, we're in the library. Most of my students today don't know what a library card does and how do you actually do the indexing and how do you actually walk through the aisles to find the book you need, right? And that is not their fault. I was actually at the University of Chicago, and they have the entire library is the actual physical books are literally underground. And they have robots that essentially go and pick the book you want and will bring it, okay? So you can't decide which technologists are doing what, right? I was flabbergasted. I mean, it was amazing, right? I mean, finding electronic things is one thing, but this is a physical book, and they essentially have developed this whole library. So what I'm saying is, some of you are now kind of getting to this jargon of ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is just a small thing. Google it is a small thing. What I just described there is essentially indexing and algorithms that drive search that allows you to have a robot that goes out and picks a physical book. So the entire large language models and what it will do is transformative, right? It is going to impact every single thing, including the way that your coffee is made in your coffee maker in the next 20 years. So we cannot even understand and appreciate the breadth of what is these data centers are and what is the demand of energy that is going to drive these data centers, right? I'm in a technology, I'm on the cutting edge of technology, and I still have to read every single day because honestly, I can't keep up with it. The thing that I want to point out there is that right now the data centers consume about 2% of the total electricity on the grid, okay? And that's mainly all of your Google servers, right? Some of you may have experienced a discomfort on Monday because the Amazon Web Services went down. And why was your Starbucks not able to work? What does it have anything to do with Amazon, right? Well, the Amazon Web Services has nothing to do with the Amazon app that you have that you order stuff off of, right? Or the Alexa that you're running in your house. By the way, my father is 84 years old and he cannot live without his Alexa. And he's not a technology forward guy, but I mean, Alexa is transformative, right? He can ask for things and it's like, oh, it works, and it actually understands his, heavily accented word. So this is going to come. It is going to change the way your life is being done, right? So AWS has nothing to do with the app that you're using. AWS is essentially a massive server, one of many in Virginia, that has everything from Starbucks to the Hilton Hotel. They're hosting their things there, right? All of those guys are running that web services off of that Amazon data center. And that's what took down and made a disruption for you. Delta was having trouble with their booking systems, right? So it is amazing. And that's just the 2%, right? So what I'm gonna show you in the next two slides is the hyperscalers is what's gonna happen. And that's where you're talking about a 5x, 5 times the energy demand that's gonna come on the grid. So here are some of the things that are going on. So there is something called hyperscalers. So essentially data centers are essentially things that use about less than a small township type of energy. Okay, so there's one at Holyoke. We put this up about 12, 15 years ago. All of the high performance computing was one areas where some of this stuff was becoming important. So all of the university campuses under the state leadership actually put up a data center in Holyoke. You guys can go visit it anytime you want. It's called the Massachusetts High Performance Green Computing. And it's about 10 megawatts of energy utilization, and they put it specifically in Holyoke because they had a hydropower available, right? And they wanted to be, this state, we are very innovative. We are lean forward. We were ahead of the game. We call it Massachusetts High Performance Green Computing for a reason. And we put MIT, Harvard, UMass system, everybody on that board to make a stance that, you know, these things are very high energy consumers because we also use a lot of energy to cool that because there's a lot of heat generation. So we were ahead of the game 15 years ago, right? But no data centers are looking to site themselves here, right? Why? They were out in Virginia, they're out in the, and some of these guys were talking to me about 3 years ago. I was in DC, and I'm like, why would you ever come to Massachusetts? We have the second highest energy center, and you know, we're not friendly to you coming and smacking down this thing in the middle of my community. I don't want you. They're like, well, at some point, we're going to have the data centers in these communities. I'm like, why? They're like, well, as we start to scale agentic AI, which is the ChatGPT, right? So as it becomes pervasive, you're going to need there's going to be data latency, right? So if you want the innovating companies to be here, they don't want that latency. So do you want them to move into Virginia, or do you want them to be here? If you want them to be here, you need a high velocity data centers available. If they're going to come in, they're going to put pressure on your energy centers. This is not hypothetical. There was a data center that was proposed at Millstone, and they said, listen, we'll do a 20-year contract with Millstone Nuclear Power Station, and we'll take 50% of your power for the next 20 years, right? And we'll pay premium. So forget about your incentives. I'll pay you a premium, 5, 10 cents, whatever you want, and I'll take your power. The governor had to step in because immediately when you take off the lowest energy on the grid, by the way, we should have stepped in too because 25% of all energy we use, was going to push up the power price for the rest of us, right? So when data centers come in, they're going to start to essentially demand large electrical loads. And when these guys become large, they're called hyperscalers. And these 6 highly capitalized, their budgets and their liquid availability of funds is greater than most nations. Most of them have capitalized at $1 trillion or, you know, in that range. And they're coming in and pricing. So here's one, right? 960 megawatts of Susquehanna Nuclear Power Station. To make a good relationship, they only asked for 120 megawatts of increments for the next 20 years, capped at half of the total capacity. Okay? That plant was going to shut down. They came in and made a agreement. Now it's going to be viable for the next 20 years, and the ratepayers are getting the benefit of the 50% of the energy, and they're going to actually have the time because they made an agreement on the ramp up. And that's AWS. 3 Mile Island, if you didn't want any kind of bad publicity, you would want to stay away from 3 Mile Island, right? I mean, outside of Chernobyl and Fukushima, everybody knows 3 Mile Island. Microsoft is the second most household name that everybody has in their home, right? I don't care if you're a Mac user, you'll still use Microsoft Office Suite. So why would they put their name with 3 Mile Island? Well, because they had a reactor there that they can actually start up. They put $1.2 billion and they're going to put it and get it started, right? So this is not one-off. This is multiple of these things that are actually happening right now. So this is the reality. This is actual things on go. So what is going to be the next phase? The next phase is going to be on the immediate basis. There's about 10 different assets on nuclear that are currently capitalized directly by hyperscalers, Google, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft. They have directly made investments in anywhere from $1 to $5 billion of cash to get the nuclear assets on their demand curve. And they're also, at the same time, all investing anywhere from $5 to $10 billion on technology development for doing the advanced reactor deployment, okay? This is the scale of economy, and none of those activities are happening in New England. I just gave you the one that I know that was happening in Connecticut. So by not being in the conversation, we are now giving up an opportunity that we can be at. And this is the future. This is the man on the moon kind of thing with the AI. It's going to happen.
Are all of these fission reactors
is, I thought there's a fusion reactor purchase that's been made.
So you are absolutely correct. All of these existing reactor assets are all fission reactors because we don't have an operating fusion reactor. There is a fusion advanced reactor deployment strategy, right? So the one people who know data, section of the industry that knows data so well is the hyperscalers, right? Those 6 guys know the world's data and they have the best algorithms to crunch all of it, okay? So they've done their math, right? And they are making the investments in existing reactors, starting them back up, and also hedging their bets on the advanced reactors. So, and one out of all of the other is all fission, okay? And none of them, if you look at all of their histories, they were not nuclear-friendly people. They were, technology-friendly people. But they're coming to realize that this is how they're going to do it. And they have investments in renewables as well, right? Yeah. So, but the thing is, this is a geographically diverse deployment strategy. The scaling is just so high that they're doing all of the above, right? So.
Maybe a little tangential question, but I was just curious, what's your opinion on the length of time it will take before a fusion reactor is commercially viable?
And I'm gonna talk a little bit about that as well. So I have a lot to talk about. I know this 1 hour is not enough, but that's what happens when you put a professor in a room. So I'm learning to be better at this stuff and not just talk forever.
And may I ask a question, how many people have questions for the professor? Okay, so a fair amount. So I'd say fairly soon to.
Yeah. So you know what? I'm more than happy to. I've told my wife I'm not available for a lot of the time, but when I am, I'm 100% with you because I think there's so much that we need to talk about, and there's so many of these communities that are really. I think we need to share this information. I think we're a little bit behind the 8 ball. So what I might do is I'll actually save some of my slides for a future conversation.
Coming up.
What's that?
Part 2.
Part 2. I am happy. I've given these talks all over the world. I'm actually, in the UK. I've given talks in Czech Republic, Sweden, Finland. So if I'm willing to fly all the way there and they don't pay business class and I'm a state institution, so I go economy, I would rather just drive here, if there's people, because that's this way I can actually go home and have dinner at home. But so what I'm saying is I am all in on being able to have a healthy conversation around this and happy to come back.
Can I just say that you did speak with Elders Climate Action, it was recorded and it's on our website, so people can go and listen to that and watch that.
And this is recorded too, just so you know, so, yep.
So if you were gonna start today to build the facility next door, when would we expect it to come online?
So, if you had asked me that question about 5 years ago, I could have lined up 5 different developers who would all fall over themselves to try to do that. Today, you're actually in line to get onto one of those developers because all of them are capitalized and they all have a project, and I'm gonna show those. So that becomes a difficult question to answer, and I'm hoping that the roadmap will give us the wedge that we're gonna need to incentivize a development strategy. And so the short answer is nuclear, like anything else. I mean, most of you, the infrastructure bill has been actually a fantastic experience. If you ever have we were driving someplace and there was a bridge and that bridge was being redone, it has taken a long time, right? Yeah. And we've been building bridges before we even could spell nuclear. So why? Engineering is hard. So I don't care how many people tell you how quickly everything is gonna happen. Engineering is hard. It will get shorter, it will get better, and if you have better permitting and regulation in place and good capital investment, you can get it done faster, but you can't just do it overnight, right? I mean, you can't, I don't care how much money you throw in and how many engineers you bring in.
I totally get it. So is it 10 years, 20 years?
I think realistically, if you were thinking New England, I think, given our neighboring states who have a much different environment, I would suspect that there's gonna be at least a new project in the next 5 years on the grid.
But a new project, but not enough to, I'm just trying to figure out, is this a short term or a really it may be great to plan long-term, but if we're trying to make capital investment today and we're trying to get to net.
But, so you're absolutely correct, right? So this is something that I'm going to actually address in the roadmap. What do I have today? Let's say I want 10, actually the projected demand curve is about, 50 gigawatts of energy, right? And I want all of it in the next 10 years. Give me one energy technology that will actually deliver. I mean, get them to sign it and say, do it, or you have penalties, okay? And I was actually, have some of these contract lawyers that will give you the structure. I can bet you none of them will actually be able to do it. The only guys who can do it is natural gas. And even now, natural gas will give you a 3 to 5 year timeline. In fact, natural gas can be built in less than 2 years. But why are they giving you 3 to 5 line?
They don't have the boiler, they don't have the.
No, the turbines are not available,
Turbines, yeah.
all right? So some of this is supply chain, right? And that's where the aperture for our opportunity is, right? So we gotta start, like, we can't just wake up and say, I'm gonna be camping tomorrow. I gotta plan for it because there's just no way around it.
Can you get an estimate based on the length of time it's taking or other data points for the AP1000 in the UAE or in South Korea, that type of thing?
You're absolutely right. And I'll show why there are certain things that will compress on timelines. And I think if things, because it's also kind of dependent on some things.
Less than volatile,
Right.
I hope.
So I think the most optimistic view from my perspective is you could put a significant amount of gigawatts from fission in the next 5 years with a plant timeline that stretches over 10 years, which is actually very nice. The more pessimistic view is you were gonna take 10 years to start putting gigawatts on the grid and get to 20 years. And in the meantime, you're just basically gonna buy it from somebody else, right, at a very high rate. So the time is to actually make a decision now so that you can actually start to fix the bridge. You can't just keep magically thinking that this bridge is gonna fix itself or some technology is gonna come solve it. So nuclear power is failing and AI can't rescue it. So you'll see a lot of viewpoints on how AI is just a hype and it'll go away. So I don't mind looking at all of this, right? I mean, I think the reality is if you wanna be an intelligent, high IQ individual, you should read everything that's available so you understand people's perspective. And that this makes you better prepared. All right, so what I'm gonna do is, this whole part 2, I'm gonna give you on the next time, but I will take a couple of minutes right here. So this is why we need to start to move, right? These are some state level dialogues that are ongoing across the board. The one that is most important to you all is New York State, right? New York State is about as aggressively against nuclear as we were. They're in a year's time. And you think that our governor took in very aggressive action by saying we need to do a roadmap? In a year's time, they're part of the Gang of 11 first mover states. And first mover states are the states that have actually a plan to deploy nuclear with a shovel in the ground starting this year. Right? And you can go back and look at it, New York had no plans to go nuclear a year ago. Governor Hochul came out there, I want a gigawatt plant, the Susquehanna plant, and there's 3 other being there. How did they get into the first movers, right? I mean, there were other states ahead of them. Nowhere, if you go back a year, you somehow figure out a way, you can look they had no position on nuclear, except pro position on nuclear, right? And now all of a sudden they're moving because they want to be in this mix and they want to have a piece of the pie. So here are some of the states that are moving, right? So we are kind of doing some things, right? So we've got stuff. We've got, I already told you about the UMASS, Lowell, and MIT. We both have operating reactors, by the way. If you've not been to one, it's a great thing to do. It's 50 years old, but it works. And it does a lot of really important things for the mission. MIT is exactly the same way. I think let's start by at least going and seeing things that we already own and operate and are doing some good things with, right? And then there's a need for, and that's why the governor's advanced nuclear study. But Texas has got all of the above. And their study that just concluded, a friend of mine actually ran this at UT Austin. I got one of my degrees at UT Austin. They just concluded a plan that says it will be about 10,000 high-paying jobs. This is current events that they did an assessment based on a 3-month workshops with wide stakeholders that just came out here. And so they're doing a workforce hub, a manufacturing hub, and a demonstration hub. They're attracting every industry to come in. They have a $350 million of state investment funds right now. They're literally attracting businesses to come and set up shop. A state like Wyoming, $150 million in state energy matching funds. They we heard of Wyoming for nuclear, right? And they've got a uranium mine, but they're actually doing 2 demonstration projects. One of them is actually fusion, that's what you were talking about. But they're really sort of lean on a fission technology. So, other states, Virginia has been investing in this for a while with $2 million. Tennessee has $60 million on the table. They have an additional money coming in. So you can start to see that everybody's talking in terms of millions. So our neighboring state, Connecticut, actually just appropriated $5 million for early siting and engagement conversations. So in our own backyard, so to speak. North Carolina's got $75 million as part of their permitting and workforce development programs. Utah's had a massive investment on state municipality partnership for a demonstration of a plant. Illinois also. So it's across the board. There's about 40 states that have some form of investment strategy going along. Ohio, that's an old number. In fact, it's almost like stock prices. You have to keep up with this on a daily basis because there's like new and new appropriations coming in. Missouri just put in 15 million on nuclear technology investment, on radioisotope production and nuclear energy. So it's like literally head-blowing, right? So what I want to stop at is that nuclear is no longer your grandmother's Oldsmobile. As much as reliable it was, the first one you drove and you had a fun time, right? And this is actually, Buick came out with this ad, and I love it, that yes, there are actually still people with blue hair, cool people driving Buick, right? So nuclear is not this old antiquated technology that is the thing of the past. So this is what nuclear reactors are going to look like, right? They're not going to be gray and ready. They're not going to be the source of energy, radiation. Majority of all small modular reactors are essentially going to be their EPZ, which most of you understand, evacuation planning zone. Right now, that EPZ is a 10-mile radius with an additional 1,500 acres of exclusion zone, which is where Plymouth is. These EPZs will be at site boundaries. So majority of them will be from 20 acre, essentially that's all their evacuation zone is, okay? So it gives you an amazing potential for where you're gonna be able to site these things, right? So they're small, they're modular, they have passive systems in place, and I can give you a technical lecture as long as you want. But that's why these are actually exciting. So we'll stop here, take some questions from you all. But there is a lot that we've been doing in the last 32 years, which is why I'm bullish on nuclear and why nuclear could be in our future. Somebody wanted to know what we're doing with the state planning. So here are some of the time for action ideas that are in place, which the governor has wanting to have the priority on. So if you look at and this is not made out of a vacuum, right? So EPRI is a organization that basically put out a roadmap for advanced nuclear deployment. And they essentially said at the national level, regulation, workforce, and supply chain are 3 critical issues. Okay? And we happen to have strength there, right? We have a lot of strength in our workforce. We have some early deployment thanks to the senator and the regions on pulling in Commonwealth fusion. And some of the green tech industry could be very useful in our ability to kind of actually be a little bit more aggressively open. So the 4 pillars of the Massachusetts roadmap that the governor would like me to put together includes, what do we need to do for regulation and permitting? What are the technologies that look viable and where they are? To some of the questions, how are they going to be able to potentially solve the problem or provide jobs and opportunities, workforce, and how do we have a meaningful public engagement? Activities just like this, but maybe in a more nuclear questioning spaces where people have genuine concerns. So we need to figure out how to engage them. So that's where we are right now. Let's do some questions. Yeah.
So what's your, what is this stakeholder group? So you can explain the study process now?
So, so I'm actually planning to have a webinar that will actually explain the roadmap a little bit more in detail in terms of where the stages are and what we need to do. So this is just actually this is not the comprehensive stakeholder list. I'm just making a stakeholder list, being informed by asking people who the critical stakeholders are. So we want to be inclusive. We want to be as diversified in our collection of information. But at the same time, when the governor originally approached us, she wanted to get it done by December. And I said, I don't know how am I gonna do that. I understand. I think it's important. I mean, she realizes that we gotta have something in place because we've been sitting around. And I think she's not wrong that we're not literally just sitting around without doing anything, right? I mean, we've actually been doing things. We just need to collate them in. And roadmap is not something that cannot be updated. And in fact, EPRI did it too. So that was a humbling and a important conversation for me to have with the governor. So I get why she wants something quick, because we can't have 2 more years. I mean, the Texas Workforce Commission spent 3 years just talking, and then they took another 1.5 years to put their roadmap together. I don't think we want to do that, right? And we don't need to do that because we now have all of those guys who have done things. So we don't need to figure out if the wheels need to be round. I mean, we know that they need to be round. So I think we can kind of go faster. So I think there are advantages, and so I think we could move a little bit faster, and then we can have the opportunity to update it as we get further along.
So what is your timeline?
So my timeline, am I being recorded?
He is very persistent, as you might know.
So I think my goal is to have at least one stakeholder meeting with all the final, list of stakeholders that we at least agree that we need to have prior to the holidays. And I want to, basically, I'm going to schedule a webinar sometime in the next, the 2nd or 3rd week of November to introduce the roadmap more broadly, talk more specifically about things. And then I'm hopefully have, my wife is, if she's not watching, I will work over the holidays. And this is not me writing this thing, by the way. So my thing was, hey, let's create a task force. And she's like, well, how long is that gonna take? Right? And so she's like, no, you figure that one out. I'm like, no, I don't want I don't want to be the only target on my back. But I honestly think that I don't have a biased view. I honestly will be more than happy if we can do this all without nuclear. I'll be very happy if we can do it just with fusion. But I also am a realist. I think that, just because I have an EV car, I don't have all my cars as EV because I do like to take long road trips and I do know exactly where the infrastructure is for charging. But I'm an engineer. I like to plan my things the way that it will make my family's opportunity correct. So I think we have a few minutes, more questions. I know there are people who are asking questions along.
And try to limit to just one question per person, just so we can get a variety of questions.
I think you kind of addressed it because my understanding is transmission and distribution can be roadblocks to getting energy from generation to the end consumer. So, I mean, it's good to see that utilities and ISOs are a part of this conversation because that seems to be an issue, right?
So you're absolutely right, and I think that's why I was being apprehensive to his respond to his answer, right? Because infrastructure is as important. Infrastructure means transmission lines, your substations. So you may not know, but nuclear power in New England was the reason why we have the 460 kV lines, because they drove the largest load on Earth. So let's think about these pipelines as the large pipelines of water, because they were the first ones that were putting up that much electricity, and New England actually developed this line. Okay? So that is the bedrock of all of that. But so as you start to think about distributed load, as you take, balance out with energy storage and nuclear, the infrastructure has to be updated, and that's not in the control of the nuclear project developer, right? You have to work with them. So that's why they're an important stakeholder. And that's why the timelines are not just because you have a guy who can build a bridge, but you need to still figure out all of the other things that may take longer. And that's why I want to be realistic. You know, I don't wanna give you a rosy picture, we can do this in 3 years, because I don't think it's something you can. If you can, that would be great, but, you know, I think that there are some things we do. Other questions?
Can you say more about the partnership that you identified between nuclear and renewables? Is there a connection that I'm missing, or are they just partners because they're complementary and you're calling nuclear green despite the fact that you have to store this unspent fuel somewhere?
So I think the in the past years, I think that they were kind of like thinking we were competing against each other, right?
Yeah.
So I have a 13 and a 15, basically they're less than a year and a half apart from each other. And the boys always thought that if one got to the table first, the other one doesn't have any food. So they are old enough now to realize that we are here, we have a plan, and nobody's gonna run away with the thing. So I think that's where I see that now they're actually always coordinating with each other. They're getting to that place where one guy is realizing that the other guy is gonna get his driver's license first. So, you know, let's be friends, right? So that's where I am seeing that renewable and nuclear can be in the same car because we are going to go towards the same direction, which is decarbonize, right? And there's sufficient burgers on the table that none of them is gonna get starved. So that's where I think. In terms of technology, I can get into deeper, you know, in terms of where you might optimize on energy storage solutions, because when you have wind available, you can offset. So there's a lot of things that go into the really sort of nitty-gritty technical details, but there are places where you can find partnerships.
Thanks. This is kind of a follow-up on that question, an earlier one. I've been to several presentations at Commonwealth Fusion, and they are convinced that they will have their plant up and running in about 5 years. Do you have insight on that and not support that perspective, or there are roadblocks and they're not telling us?
So I have no reason to not believe a developer who thinks that they can get there, right? Because the kind of information that they have on the inside is not something that I have. But for somebody who has been frying their turkey for 15 years, and I started doing that way back when, I know how long it takes to fry a turkey. And when I change that from a 10-pound to a 15-pound, it's not just a linear scale, right? Because it depends on how that is. So what I can tell you is that getting the first one up and operating is entirely something that they may know on the inside. But to get the fourth one, that you start to have a meaningful impact on the number of electrons on the grid, it is nowhere close to a decade. I would argue maybe 2 decades, because engineering is hard. If fission reactors, okay, the PWR fuel assembly, it is a 17x17 fuel assembly, the industry has been making it. There are 5 vendors in the whole world that can make that fuel, okay? Westinghouse has been making it for 65 operating reactors for more than 50 years. When they went out and made a change, so there's a VBR, which is a Russian design, essentially is a hexagon, so you add additional 2 planes, right? So instead of having 4 planes square, you're at 6 planes. You know how many fuel failures they had for so many years? Just that change. It took them more than 3 years, and they still cannot make the fuel assembly as good as the Russians could. Exactly the same thing. Why? These things have such low tolerances, it takes such an quality engineering, it takes, and this is not, nuclear is not that as any more complicated than wind turbines, right? We're learning with wind turbines, when you put them out in offshore and you want to do the maintenance on them, when the blade goes off and the shears off of it, you know, what we don't come to appreciate is when you put 5,000 of these things in deep sea and then be able to maintain it, it's different than putting one on my university campus that I can do a lot of things with, right? So this is where I feel that when you get out of that first demonstration reactor to build to scale, right, there is going to be, because you don't have the same construction crew, right? Your order of control actually gets out, right? So when you want to build one that most of my engineers, go and look at the Tesla's solar panel deployment strategy, okay? They did not want to work with construction guys because they thought that they were going to do it best. And then they realized that they couldn't convince their guys to go from California out to Massachusetts to build it. And then their guys in California didn't know how to do it right in Massachusetts. In fact, my neighbor put it up and his deck collapsed because all the snow comes literally on there, right? So there are things that are regionally relevant. So you can't move your guys who are perfectly trained from one location to the other because some of them may not want to do it. Then when you do move them, they don't know how to do it in that new region. So all of those things will become real, right? So, I mean, I can do it here in Devon's, but then as soon as I go down to Virginia, I'm gonna understand the regulations. I mean, try putting a solar, a energy storage Tesla power wall. There's different regulation in every town in the state of Massachusetts, okay? So your installer is gonna get bogged down first to figure out what the regs are in your town. These are real issues, right? These are not technology issues. The power wall looks like the power wall. You know, it takes 4 bolts and put it up there, but do you understand the regs? What are those regs? How do I achieve those regulations? How do I get the inspector to come in and certify it, right? So when I say electrons on the grid, it took me 4 months after the power wall is on to get it actually working, right? So that's what I mean. You know, I mean, I can run any of these technologies in my lab, but I think to do it at scale in somebody's backyard is going to take time. It's just, but you can't, you're never going to have it unless you actually start, right? So that's why I feel like my one takeaway message is you cannot just sit around on the side. Even if you say fission is good for me, put it in my backyard, you're not going to have it running next week. But you got to say yes first, and let's start building something and testing something. I'm going to follow Megan's one question at a time.
You've made a case for the need and you've acknowledged the risks and perceptions, but if I were to go out to go to my community, if a project were proposed, maybe this is a different talk, but could you talk about risk mitigation and what the, if the risks aren't risks anymore, what?
Yeah.
How do you address all those concerns?
Spot on. So again, I think that's why I'm willing to give at least 10 different presentations on this different topics, right? So the one that you're talking about, one that I think cannot be ignored and as communities come up, is on spent fuel management, right? What are you going to do with the spent fuel? So that's something that we actually do have a meeting on November 13th at UMASS Lowell where we will specifically talk about spent fuel. There's 80,000 tons of spent fuel currently from our current operating reactors, right? How do you handle that? What are you going to do with it? What are the associated risks? In a scientific way, what are the real solutions? Where are the policy constraints? Where are the regulatory constraints? Same thing would come about radiation. I think you mentioned about radiation concern, right? General radiation exposure concerns. How do you communicate that with the public? I think there are several technology-specific things that we need to explain to folks and not in an intimidating way, but in an open dialogue way. So yes, those are all necessary before we can keep going forward. I'll go to you and then I'll go to my friend.
I really want to thank you for taking a very complex, multi-dimensional subject and trying to help us through all this. So thanks for taking on the challenge. My question is somehow we need to separate fusion and fission because they're two fundamentally different technologies and the risks are different and the promises are different. So I don't know how to do that easily, but
so I actually, you're right that they are different, but they're both nuclear reactions, and actually they happen to be most closely on the same curve that anybody could put them, right? Because actually fusion and fission are on the same binding energy curve. So anybody who learns how to do fission reaction also learns how to do fusion reaction. Okay. So the issue is not in the science, all right? The issue is actually in the engineering. And that's where you start to see some of the synergies and conflicts, right? So I know we shouldn't talk about weapons, but fission weapon was done first and then a fusion weapon was done later because the fusion is an inherently energy negative reaction, which means that it takes a lot of energy in order for fusion to happen. right? When it does happen, it eventually becomes energy positive. And that's where some of the technological challenges were, and people are working on those technologies. Okay, let's assume that we've got that figured out. But then when you start to do it at scale, you need magnets that are larger. For example, if you're using magnetic confinement. If you're gonna use laser confinement, you're gonna need lasers that are reliable at high energy. So then the supply chain becomes a challenge, right? So like when you put 10 of these lasers, so it took more than about 15 years, the Lawrence Livermore National Lab to put up this laser that they did the demonstration on, right? So if I wanted to now order, let's say I got it figured out and I wanted 10 of these laser lines so that I can get the fusion going. I just don't have the manufacturing capacity, right? So there are these engineering challenges that are, common, right? So some of them are actually similar because you still have a high radiation environment and you have a extreme temperature environment, right? High control systems requirements, right? These things are pulsing at nanoseconds, right? So you need a control systems that will allow you to be able to do that consistently for fusion. That technology is similar. You need the same guys that Snyder and Honeywell, to develop this technology, right? You need the same guys at IBM to scale quantum computing so that I can actually do this at scale. So there are some convergence, right? So that's why the fusion and fission guys are gonna be happy. Extreme environment performance and materials, right? The magnets essentially need the same advancements in advanced materials that the fission reactor guys need, right? So there is some commonality there.
Where the fusion guys think they made a breakthrough is in the superconductors, allowing magnets to.
Yeah, absolutely. So breakthroughs are a real thing, right? But what I would say is, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record, right? So the problem is scientific breakthrough is not an engineering reality.
That's the easy part. Right. The hard part then comes right after it, and that's.
And that's where, just because you throw billions of dollars does not short circuit that timeline, right? So I think that's where some of the real conversations need to happen, and that's why maybe some of the folks trust me, because I'm not also telling you that fission is there, right? I mean, I would love to be able to say that. I can bring you 5 different vendors who are incredibly smart, 10 times smarter than me, and they will all tell you they've got the best technology and they solve all the problems that are there and they can build one tomorrow. And I can tell you, none of them are gonna build it tomorrow, because if they wanted to, they're just not gonna have the guys who can bring all the pumps, which is where the opportunity for us is, right? We can build the supply chain, which will have the immediate impact on our microeconomics and macroeconomics. Well-paying jobs that will feed into the nuclear energy that we are not currently incentivizing. So those are some of the immediate impacts that I feel we should really think about. That's my personal opinion. Whatever the stakeholders say would be the reality of the world. Any other questions?
One last question.
One last
It's
question.
So I'm gonna just put a kind of a framework around it. So when we look at TerraPower, the Natrium reactor, I was wondering if you can respond generic, not honing in on the technology. But there's a couple key points that people have asked questions that I think are really interesting, that they could find out. So when you have that Natrium reactor, okay, can you articulate how they're constructing it now, which is basically they're building the balance of the plant now, and they will get to the nuclear island. Why is that important? Reduce construction time. When you look at what is the problem with nuclear around cost? It's construction time and finance. So that's number one. Number two, that same technology complements solar wind. It helps deal with that intermittency because of their mid-tier storage. So I think those two things will help the audience understand.
So I have come to appreciate that the audience is normally smarter than I am. And this is true when I'm teaching my students. I think they're very smart today, right? And so are all of you, probably more informed than I am. So I think it is not so much my intention to explain to you a technology, because I could do that all day long. And that's what Sean was talking about. But I think it would be useful as a different context when everybody's mindset is in the same place, to talk about what are the differences in technology? You know, I mean, we kind of talked about fusion and fission, but I think there are some things that we can actually peel the onion a little bit more. But we gotta mentally get there, and we should come for a different kind of a conversation, where we're kind of interested in that, right? It's hard to kind of go from, you know, when you're waiting for that toast, getting a croissant is kind of throws you off, even though croissant's a little more basic. But I wrote this paper as a part of the thought leader that got a lot of attention. And this is where I think, you know, my head is, from quads to grid. And I chose that title because we have some of the best quads, right, university campuses. We are the major exporter of technology innovation. I think it is time to also engage on the grid. I think it is about time that we come up on this. And so that was my big push. And then this is my closing slide that I use. This has nothing to do with the actual talk, but I often use this as so I'm asking ChatGPT